There's been yet again another confrontation from Volkswagen, a legal confrontation that underscores the complexities of the current global EV market. So Volkswagen has initiated a lawsuit against a German car dealer, and the dealer is called Gregory Brudny, for importing and offering the Chinese exclusive, so it's a car you can only buy in China, for sale. It's the ID.6 in Germany. So what he's done is really fascinating. This is actually kind of an interesting thing, and I enjoyed researching this. So the case highlights the tension between national market exclusivities. There are differences between European cars and Chinese cars. A couple of things. For example, I think one of them is if you crash the car, a European car might automatically call the local police. That doesn't happen in China, for example, and you can't program that in from an over-the-air update. There are different regulatory standards, and there's different global demand for affordable electric vehicles. Different places want different things. Volkswagen know this, and this is why they're so bothered by this, I think. Basically, this German dealer bought some Volkswagens from China with his own money, altered them, and then tried to sell them locally. And Volkswagen really don't like this. There is more to it, but before I get into it, thank you for watching. I'm Ben Alexander, and I make EV news videos every day. Thank you very much for tuning in. I must say as well, the next video is about the worst car that Marcus Brownlee has ever reviewed. If you don't know Marcus Brownlee, the big tech YouTuber, and he did a really good job, I think, on his video. Fascinating. Spent the first 10 minutes explaining why this car is actually pretty good, and then proceeded to say why it's very bad, and I was just kind of jaw-dropped. It is terrible. There's some really big issues there. Seems pretty terrible to me, so the next video is about that. Stick around if you're interested in that. So let's get back into the controversy, which began when Brudny, operating within Germany, imported 22, he bought out of his own money, 22 brand new electric cars from China, from Volkswagen. So he bought the ID.6 electric car, a little bit bigger than the ID.4, for example. This model is produced in China by the 4 group. It's the joint venture between Volkswagen and 4. 4 is the big China. It's like a big group of Chinese companies. I think it's been going for like 50 or 70 years. They've made cars for decades, literally. So 4 and Volkswagen have been making these cars in China to sell as Volkswagens in China for quite a bit cheaper, it must be said, than they're currently available for in Germany or Europe, for example. So they're intended solely for the Chinese market, even though they might look and feel the same. Brudny's acquisition of these vehicles from an authorized Volkswagen dealer in China was notable because the Chinese vehicle registration on the car indicated these ID.6 units were intended for export, and Volkswagen spotted that, and these cars had technically been adapted to meet the Federal Motor Transport Authority's requirements in Germany. So the ID.6 is exclusively available in China, like I said, as part of the expanding ID sub-range. Obviously, they've got the ID.4, the ID.6, for example. Essentially, it's an extended, slightly longer, extended wheelbase version of the ID.4, about a foot longer, so that much longer, with 3 rows of seats accommodating 7 people, or up to 7 people. And it's available in 2 versions, the ID.6X and the ID.6 Cross. In China, prices start for the ID.6 at the equivalent of €33,700. In Germany, the smaller wheelbase ID.4 starts at €40,335. The ID.6 being significantly cheaper than its European counterparts, even after considering its import costs and its taxes, representing a potential loophole for local dealers here in Europe. And that's what this guy thought. And its introduction into Europe by Brudny promised to make affordable electric vehicles more accessible to local consumers until he got the email. So he was effectively going to try and do this and try and get away with it and make some money. For sure they would have spotted that. Someone selling a brand new Volkswagen ID.6 in Europe. We don't even sell them ourselves for maybe a bit less than what we could even get it to them for. So it's a bit of a dodgy deal. The cost to ship a vehicle from China to Germany right now, I've done some research on this, actually also when I considered looking at getting a Seagull, BYD Seagull. So it's about €1,850 up to €3,700 roughly, And depending on how many you ship and how you want it shipped and how you package it up and that sort of thing, if you bought 22 cars and shipped them, I reckon you get a slightly better price and you could ship them all over across the world. So if you stick that on top of the already good price at 33,000 or 33,700 euro in China, and that price is not the price he would have paid, by the way, you would also get out of most local taxes in China once you prove that you exported them out of the country, and then you can get that money back when you buy a car in China with the intention of exporting it, because it's a very common thing to do. When you export it to Germany, you avoid paying certain, actually most, local taxes in China. So particularly those associated with the purchase for domestic use, such as VAT and consumption tax. So this largely depends on the specific regulations and policies in places at the time of purchase and export. Depends if you bought it from Shanghai, for example, or I don't know, a couple of other places in China. I don't want to say them wrong. If you ensure that all these required documents are in order, then you'd be all right. That is crucial. You've got to do that, of course. So this includes export declarations, possibly a certificate of origin for when the cars rock up in Germany, and the ID number in China is specific to Chinese VWs. So the process may involve engaging with customs or a customs broker, or an export agent who can navigate the complexities of export regulations and just make sure stuff doesn't go wrong, especially when you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on 22 cars. He may have done that, of course. So the car must go through export customs clearance in China. This process ensures that all the conditions for export are met, including tax exemptions, rebates, things like that. So you might save on Chinese taxes, but you'll also need to consider the import taxes, of course. So VAT and customs duties that Germany imposes on imported vehicles. These costs are quite substantial. They're actually very high, and they're calculated based on the car's value, the type of car that it is, and the environmental criteria. So here's the key part to this, I think, or one of the key parts to this. It's an EV, and it's a Volkswagen. So importing that to Germany, the import taxes, not very high, actually. Although Volkswagen don't like it, but if you take Volkswagen out of the equation, importing it as a car from China, it ticks some good boxes. So actually the costs were quite small. I've done a bit of research on this. I won't chuck some numbers at you, but basically it's not that bad at all. But suffice it to say, it's cheaper to import an EV from China than a used car from France, for example. That is kind of a big deal. So Volkswagen has taken a firm stance against the sale of these particular 22 imported ID.6s from China into Europe, arguing that they do not meet the European vehicle standards. So a bit of a quote: "The ID models produced for and in China and sold there are not eligible for approval in Europe due to their hardware and software configuration." They don't specify approval from whom. So technically, they differ slightly from the versions for the European market. A Volkswagen spokesperson said this, and he told a German company, Automobil Vock, I think you say. Don't lecture me if I've said that wrong. This legal action against Brittany shows Volkswagen's commitment to maintaining a certain level of integrity, although it has to be said they clearly have very little integrity, hence Dieselgate and all the other scandals that they just didn't get a cool name for, such as Dieselgate. There are a few others. Even after Dieselgate, there's been at least two that I know of. So the lawsuit emerges against the backdrop of a broader debate over the influx of Chinese EVs into European markets. China's aggressive pricing, because they're very, very cheap, even for local markets there, often attributed to state subsidies. Obviously, this is kind of a big deal, and this is why the EU have sent some people to probe, has made its EV offerings highly competitive globally. That's why basically all the cars, if they want to be, they could sell a BYD Seagull for, £13,000 if they ramped up the prices and imported them and all that stuff. They could do that and genuinely make a bit of money on it, which is kind of crazy. So the European Commission launched their anti-subsidy probe into EV imports from China. So like I've said before, by sending representatives to China, actual people to China, and China let them in which is kind of remarkable, I think. This could backfire on them, by the way, to have a look into the inner workings of some of these Chinese companies, like Geely, SAIC, MG, I don't know, who else? BYD, for example, to actually go in and probe to address concerns over market distortion, working conditions, unfair competition. Basically, I think they just want to come up with anything so they can say that we shouldn't be buying these cars and it's not ethical or something like that, or it's a silly thing, we shouldn't be buying these cars in Europe. So this probe has led to retaliatory investigations by China into European luxury liquor products, indicating the growing tension between China and Europe in trade relations, really. Volkswagen's legal challenge to Gregory Brudney's importation of the ID.6 vehicles from China into Germany, I would say, is more than a mere contractual dispute. As countries and companies navigate the complexities of international standards and, amongst some other things, subsidies, market access, and general shifty business practices from those around them, both in politics and out of politics, the outcome of this, I think, may set important precedents for the automotive industry's future. I think it is. I think they're sort of setting the terrain for the next 10 years, I think. So Volkswagen have been pushing to have the cars destroyed, which I think is pretty extreme. But I don't think that will happen at all. Technically, I could buy an aeroplane from China. Sure, I may not be able to fly it when it gets here, but I can put it in my garden for a not-so Airbnb. Surely I would say that the German importer can keep them, but he just can't sell them. Or he can sell them, but not as a working vehicle. Something like that. So sadly, the EU and Volkswagen quite intertwined. Volkswagen being a massive, massive, massive company. Obviously, they own like Audi and Lamborghini and all sorts of other companies. Seat, for example, Porsche. Frankly, I think they can basically dictate, just because they're so wealthy and they're so in bed and in the pockets of the EU. They can dictate how this kind of goes. Something to also note here is with the anti-Chinese EV probe going on from the Chinese officials from the EU in China. China could also do the same with Volkswagen, couldn't they? They really could do the same the other way around, which is tragic, really, because we've got 720 million people in Europe. They've got 1.4 billion. Technically, it's not really it's not it's not apples to apples. You can't really compare just with the population numbers. But they do sell a lot of Volkswagen products and Mercedes and Audis in China, and they could really just slap a big tax on that, I think. This could end up feasibly worse for Volkswagen and the EU than for China, I think. So, thoughts, anyone? What do you all think? Please let me know what you think in the comments. And I will be, when I post this video for the next few hours, I'll be sitting around just doing some admin work. And so I'll be checking the comments, and I'll be live for the next few hours just checking comments. So if you've got anything to say it, and have at it, because this is a really interesting topic. I think the guy should be able to buy a car and bring it to Europe and sell it. But of course, that's not how these things work, and we're talking about big money, and it's a bit more complex, isn't it, than just buying something, bringing it to where you live and selling it. Like a gem, for example, like a gemstone or a ring or a watch or something. We're talking about, a brand new product, and yeah, bit of an issue. So what do you all think? Let me know in the comments. Yeah, see you in the next video tomorrow.